Welcome to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm Audrey Kanata, operations lead here at the Digital Growth. And today we are continuing with the Banking on Change series. And joining us to talk about his new book, Banking on Change, The Leader's Guide to Achieving Exponential Growth in the Age of AI, is the one and only James Robert Lay.
Hey, Audrey. Good sharing time with you today.
Yes, you too. What's good for you today?
Today's a big day. It's book launch day. And
It's a big day.
It is a big day. And I know when we listen to this podcast a year from now or 10 years from now, which is, I think it's very interesting how we're able to start capturing and documenting moments in time. We're going to look back at this and say, my goodness, look at how much has changed even over the last year or the last 10 years, because right now, one of the things that I'm sharing out on LinkedIn, I found some old videos of interviews that I did all the way back in 2014 at the very first Financial Brand Forum out in Las Vegas. And I was asking questions. I was asking attendees questions back then about like, what is banking going to look like in 20 years? So that would be 2014 to 2034. And ironically, funny enough, here we are in 2024, 10 years later, we're at the middle of that 20-year horizon line. But also, if you think about this too, 2014 was only 20 years after the internet reached the mass consciousness of humanity back in 1994.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Well, today is a very exciting day. One that we touched on the last episode has been just a day in the making. This book took a little bit longer than expected to get out, but it is out. And so we are excited to share it. Let's take a little bit of time. I know before we got into the backstory on just the journey that this book was, getting it not only written, but published, and some of the challenges that you encountered and how you overcame them. You overcame those obstacles and turned them into opportunities. Let's start off today with just a quick overview of the book. What is this book about? Banking on Change. Coming off of your last book, Banking on Digital Growth. Where are we headed now?
So this is the leader's guide to achieve exponential growth in the age of AI. And before we get too far ahead, I want to just unpack what exponential growth means, what I'm referring to. Exponential growth is when an individual, a team, or an organization perceives that they are growing personally and professionally at the same exact time. And that is because what impacts us personally is going to impact us professionally. What impacts us professionally is going to impact us personally.
Yes, I'm so glad you made it a point to explain that. And that is something that I have appreciated so much just in my journey since returning for tour number 2 4 years ago. I never really thought about how your personal and professional growth really are, can be so intertwined together. And I can honestly say that I've kind of lived this experience where, what I am doing at home and what I'm doing here, the lessons I'm learning professionally, I'm applying those personally and vice versa. And it really is kind of a beautiful thing because a lot of times we feel like we're torn between the two. They're kind of working in, a little bit of a tension with each other, like push and pull, give and take. If you can find that sweet spot to where you're kind of cruising along personally and professionally together.
Well, it's so true. And, if I think about where I was back in that 2012 time period, and I write about this in the book and I tell this story, I was not in a good place. I was essentially kind of rock bottom emotionally, rock bottom relationally. And the irony of that is I was in a great place financially, but none of that mattered. Especially when my wife is telling me, you've got to make a choice. It's the business or the family. And I realized at that moment that I needed some help. And so a lot of what I'm writing to in this book has been what I've learned, yes, but also the patterns that I have picked up coaching, guiding, leading, advising financial brand marketing, sales, and leaderships on their own journeys of growth.
Yeah, you do. You get really, really real
Yeah.
and pretty raw in the book, sharing your own. It took a lot of courage for you to share your story, your struggles, what you've been through. But I think that's part of what makes this book so compelling. It's really that the humanity behind it. And hey, I'm a real person, real struggles, real problems. Let me share them with you to help you on your journey of growth.
I think a lot of this is founded in the fact that of who I spend a lot of time with, and not spend, who I invest a lot of time with. I think about, because you mentioned the idea of courage, Dan Sullivan pops into my head, because one of the things that I've learned from him is courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid. Courage means to take action in the face of fear, number one. But courage also means that, you're most likely going to have to walk forward in warm and wet pants.
Yeah.
And let me tell you,
It's not going to be comfortable.
I feel like I walk around in warm and wet pants more often than not. But we're, if I can take some of what I've learned and some of what I've seen, those more specifically, what I've seen those that I have coached, guided, and have advised over the years, I've seen what they've been able to do. That's where exponential growth really starts to find leverage. I think about one specific team, one specific marketing team that was nothing more than just two people when they came and visited us back in 2014 to attend one of our workshops, and to look at their personal and their professional growth over the last decade. My goodness, because now they're a
Beautiful.
team of 6 or so. New team members have joined. It's the mindset
Yeah.
that they have established and have expanded, and then are positively impacting other areas of the organization. It's like, what makes them different? Why are they in a good mood when everyone else is feeling a little bit frustrated and chaotic? And a lot of it is the fact that they have intentionally created space and time to master their mind while breaking free from the chaos and the complexity that tends to arise around that 90-day period, which is the whole point of what I talk about in the book with the 90-day growth method.
Yep. It is a commitment. It does take it does take a commitment, and that is what sets them apart. It is the mindset, and I know that's something that you talk about moving forward.
Yeah.
As things get more complex, specifically around AI technology, what is going to set people apart?
I think this idea of AI, it'll be interesting to get some feedback as people begin to read this. And the feedback has already been very positive from those who have had an early read. But AI creates an exponential multiplier of capability, but it's also going to require us to transform what we do, how we do, and why we do what we do. And the issue is we tend to, and a lot, I have to deal with this myself.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to attach our value and our worth to what we do.
Yep.
But we are way bigger than what we do. And the
What
only
we
way
think.
to, it's what we think, it's what we feel. And really at the core, it's what we believe. It's what we believe to be true. And that is the essence of human transformation. There are really 5 steps here. And if you think about the struggles of quote unquote digital transformation over the last, we'll just say, decade, 60 to 85% of all digital transformation initiatives have either failed or failed to meet expectations, not because of the technology or a flaw in the technology. It was because of a flaw in the operating system
Mhm.
of the individuals or the teams that were having to deploy that technology. It's the human factor. And a lot of the quote unquote change management has been around transforming what people are doing. Very practical example through the work that we see is like CRM, for example.
Yeah.
You say that word and you can see the negative emotional response from team members and leaders based upon past experiences around CRM. Well, instead of focusing on what people do, let's work in, because what people do, the 5 steps of human transformation here, what we do on a day in and day out basis, they're just habits. And I think what is very interesting to me is, as I shared and I have shared with teams some of the thinking in the book, 95% of what we do runs at a subconscious level.
Very true.
And so if what we do are habits, what are habits? They're the actions that we repeatedly take at a subconscious level. What inspires our actions? It's our feelings, it's our emotive state. What influences our feelings? It's our thoughts. What impacts our thoughts the most? It's our beliefs. And so when you're going through a period of exponential change and exponential transformation, we're going to have to create space and time to review all of those different elements as an individual, as a team, and as an organization.
Yeah, 100%. So in the beginning of the book, pretty early on, you open up and you kind of give us a little history lesson, just to kind of get that context of where we've seen these really pivotal moments of exponential change that have really transformed our culture and our humanity, which then helps us to really understand where we are today, but also just how fast things are happening. Um, so bring us back to that. What are these 4 pivotal moments that you set us up with in the beginning of the book?
Well, if we go back and look at time, and I think this is the interesting piece of the work that I get to do as a digital anthropologist that has been, and will continue to study the intersection of marketing, sales, technology, and human behavior. We go back to these exponential periods of transformation. First, dawn of humanity. It's fire. Fire is this exponential fuel that leads to exponential growth because it led to exponential advances in what we're doing. It allowed us to travel at night, provided light, it provided warmth, it provided protection, and that allowed us to build tools. And so we just saw an exponential growth and progress coming out of that period of time. Another point, if we're looking back in history, it was 1436. And you're like, well, what happened in 1436? One word: Gutenberg, printing press. And what the exponential gain that we saw there was, it allowed and empowered individuals, people, to capture and share their thinking, their ideas at scale. And so
Communication.
it's communicate. Exactly. It was an exponential leap in communication. So we have to be mindful of how that played out what we saw with the rise of the internet, what we saw with the rise of social media, now what we're seeing with the rise of even AI. Because if we go back to the printing press of 1436, the widespread knowledge that we were able to disseminate thought, how thought can then go on to transform what people believe, how thought can transform culture, how thought
Yeah.
can transform and elevate ideas, even because your thoughts combined with my thoughts, while they aren't the same exact thoughts, they could complement. Even if we don't agree, they can still complement one another. And out of our shared thought, we can then form a new thought that goes on to create something even bigger than what any one of us could have done alone. So then we flash forward, late 1800s. We have electrical power, and even preceding that, it was steam. But I think it was the
Yeah.
electrical evolution
Yeah.
that
I would agree.
really led to the transformation of economies. We saw the Industrial Revolution, and now companies have the ability to produce, to create, to operate around the clock. And so now you have this cultural impact there. And then finally, 1958, the invention of the microchip. We see exponential leaps in computing power. And from that point forward, it's
Took
it
off.
it truly is a whole new world. It's a brave new world. And now you have the internet, you have AI, and it's like it, the challenge here is exponential technologies continue to move at an exponential multiplying rate,
Yeah.
but our minds think linearly.
Yeah. And it's hard to imagine, life without. I mean, I think we're going to look back, in a decade and maybe even chuckle at ourselves or laugh or think, wow, just for example, chat GPT, large language models, who knows how that's going to be
Yep.
woven into our everyday lives. I was just talking to my daughter randomly this morning about how, they don't understand. I had to explain what a home phone, like a home phone that was, pre-cell phone plugged in and you couldn't go anywhere without, because they are walking home from school now. And so, but they don't have a cell phone. And so we were talking about, well, before the only way you could communicate is if you got home, made sure somebody else was home. That alone, that they don't even get that.
You're tapping into something that I open up the book with here, and this is even before we get into the real meat. And the way that I broke the book up, it's three different sections. You've got what I call the exponential growth journey. That's the philosophical foundation. The second part is the practical tools preparing for exponential growth, which I know is your favorite part. And
Mm-hmm.
and then finally, it all comes together with how to apply the tools in a strategic framework to achieve exponential growth every 90 days. What you're speaking to with the example of the phone and your daughter, and we've had these same conversations with our kids, it comes down to one thing. It is a matter of perspective. And perspective is the sum of context and framing. And really, I believe very strongly how old an individual was in 1994, if they were even alive back then,
Right.
is going to directly influence how they're experiencing the world today.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's get into that. You recently facilitated a team alignment workshop and you asked this question. I think I want to say it was within the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe.
I've gotten really good at asking really rude questions
Yeah.
very early
I
on
mean,
in relationships.
yeah, right off the bat, you asked this group it was an executive team,
Mhm.
and you asked them to write down how old they were in 1994. it served a very, very good purpose. It was a great icebreaker too. And the responses, I mean, we had a variety. I think the oldest was in the room had been, were they in their 30s in
late
94,
late 20s, maybe 29 or
late 20s.
32, I
And
believe.
yes, and the youngest was a couple months old.
Exactly. um and this is an
So
important, it's
why open up with that
well,
question?
it's an important point to make, and I open up the book the same exact way, because what happened in 1994 is like going back in time and looking at harnessing fire, the Gutenberg printing press, the industrial revolution coming from electricity, electrical energy, the invention of the microchip. It's the next stage in this massive leap of growth and progress at a macro level. The challenge, though, is the context and the framing, the perspective that a 29, 30, 31, 32-year old had back in 1994 is going to be vastly different than the other individual who was just a couple of months old at the time. It's going to be vastly
Mhm.
different than someone who was born like, my oldest. He is, it's crazy to say this, he's Gen Z, but he was born in 2010. So his experience and your daughter's experiences are very different than our experiences when we're kind of the same time period, is different than someone who was, you know, 29 or 30 back in 94.
Yeah. So why 1994? What's the significance here? Is that I know you didn't pick just a random date.
Well, I was 13 years old in 1994. And so that would have made me an eighth grader at Bonnet Junior High in Deer Park, Texas. And that was the year that the internet reached the mass consciousness of humanity. I think what's very interesting is the internet was obviously not new,
Right.
but it was new for the majority of people. The majority of people were just getting introduced to the internet back in 1994. I had the opportunity to be logging on, I want to say 2, if not 3 years prior to that, because I would go up to my dad's work on like a Saturday and they would
Mhm.
have a spare computer that was connected to the internet. And I would just sit there and like noodle around and just figure things out. And I remember one time I ended up in a chat room, which now sounds really weird even saying this,
Oh, yeah.
but this is early on. And the chat was about something I was in. It was basketball cards or baseball cards. So I had a very early contextual experience to the internet, connecting with people, and in some cases, people in other parts of the world. Now, if we go back though, there have been some very specific points on this journey, because 1994, 2024, that's a 30-year horizon line. And the changes that we've experienced, and more specifically, the exponential changes that we've experienced over that period of time, what have they impacted? They've impacted the competitive landscape. They've impacted the buying behavior of people,
Yep.
but they've also impacted the beliefs, the consumer beliefs, and how people connect with one another just in 30 years. You're talking about the phone once again. I think about, as a
Yeah.
kid, a rotary phone. Like,
Yeah.
go have your daughter try to dial on a rotary phone. It's like, it's very cheap entertainment. You probably buy a rotary phone. And for anyone watching or listening, if you have kids, buy a rotary phone off of eBay. It's like worth the cheap
Yeah.
entertainment.
Well, even I mean, my son who is 6, even like watching him pick up my cell phone to talk to somebody, he doesn't even know to put it up to his ear.
It's very
It's
true.
speaker. He talks to it. There is no, ear to mouth at all.
But I want to pause on that point. See, when I talk about this idea of the transformation of behaviors, that's a very practical example of a transformation of behavior tied to communication. And if you think, what is marketing, sales, and leadership? Marketing, sales, and leadership is communication. But why? And it's a deeper question that I see a lot of marketing and sales leaders struggle with, in even leadership teams. What is marketing? What is sales? What is leadership? And they say, it's communication. It's influence. Something has influenced that behavior for your son. And I can't, once again, my contextual experience, and I'm a nerd here, but I just can't help but think he's talking on a tricorder from Star
Yeah.
Trek. Because
Yeah.
that's how they would talk. Like, if you go back and you watch the old Star Treks, even the Star Treks from like the 60s and the 70s, it was a tricorder that they weren't holding up to their ear. They were talking to it like this. So it's like, well, what influenced that belief to then inspire that behavior? I even think with my kids, like, phone conversations or FaceTime conversations. They're video
Of course.
conversations.
Right. It's interesting. I even feel I had a call the other day, and it's almost like I assume now when I'm scheduling a call with somebody, it's going to be on Zoom.
Mm.
If it's not on Zoom, I'm kind of like, oh, we're just talking. No video involved. Which I think is interesting though, because 4 years ago, oh, we're doing a video call. That's terrifying.
You know what? Do you remember when you called me up and you had asked me, you might have even just sent me a message like, hey, do you still have a spot for me? This is like
Yeah,
back in,
I DM'd you.
that's what it was. You DM me on Facebook, I think. Or was it
Yes.
LinkedIn? Probably.
Probably
I think
Facebook.
it was Facebook. But then I remember we actually had a Zoom conversation.
This is my
This
first
is,
Zoom call.
are you serious? That was your first
Yeah.
Zoom call? I had no
Uh-huh.
idea. See, that
Yep.
was pre-pandemic. That was like January of 2020.
It was, and I remember thinking, and I took that Zoom call in my classroom. I actually skipped our staff picture to take that call with you. I was hiding out in there, and I remember you sent me the Zoom link, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've never used this. I feel like an idiot. I mean, here I am, about to go, talking to James Robert, who I know is so advanced, digitally and technologically, and I'm trying to make something happen here, but I don't even know what I'm doing right now on this platform.
So see, this is the first time that you've shared this with me. I had no idea of this perspective from
Yeah.
you. And what's interesting is how many others feel the way that you feel about any type of exponential technological transformation. And at the time, that was a massive leap for you.
Hmm.
And if you think about what happened with the pandemic, that was an exponential leap of communication capability, i.e., video
Yeah.
first. And
And now
now,
I don't want to go back though.
right. And it's like, if we're not connected on Zoom and you and I have a conversation, it's FaceTime, unless
Yeah.
the connection is horrible. And I was like, okay, we'll just gotta do it the old fashioned way. But I do
Yeah.
feel like there's a lost element of communication when it's voice only. And so you're talking behaviors and beliefs once again.
Hmm.
But if you go back, kind of like how I was pre-internet to a degree. Like, I was logging on probably 91, maybe 92. But then it's like the rest of the world catches up and they're now logging on. And in 1994, the internet, and we've done podcast conversations, like we have featured the Today Show, and some of the
Yeah.
segments that were being aired in 1994 and how they were talking about the internet back then. It's almost how people were talking about AI now. But just like that experience, my experience with Zoom, I was actually using Zoom back in 2017 was when I first started using Zoom, because I was so sick and tired and fed up of the other platforms like GoToMeeting and what was the other? There was another one that just, the user experience was horrible.
Skype.
Skype was one, but it wasn't really conducive for meetings because not a lot of
Yeah.
people were on Skype. It was very, I remember doing podcasts actually back probably around 2014, 2015 with Brett King, on his podcast, Breaking Banks. And he was using Skype back then, but I started using Zoom and I like the simplicity of it. And I remember I felt like the weirdo because every time that I would send someone a meeting link, they probably felt like you, like, what is this thing? They didn't want to share their video with me. I was the
Mm-mm.
only one who was sharing video, but I was like, okay, I'm going to be a leader here. I'm going to lead by example because I know the power of body language with communication. And so you can see me, that's fine. I have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
I can't see you, that's okay. That's how you feel comfortable. I'm going to meet you where you're at. And I think when we go down this timeline from 1994 to 2024,
Yeah.
this is nothing more than to provide some perspective, context, and framing into everything that we've experienced within a 30-year period of time. And we might have felt uncomfortable at one point. I mean,
Yeah.
take for example, July 5th, 1994. Bezos transforms the way that we shop forever. I mean, if think about how old you were. I mean, if you were of shopping age, I mean, I was 13 in 94, so I wasn't buying anything online. But I know my parents weren't. They didn't feel
No.
comfortable with that.
Mm-mm.
Um, Same thing, May 18th, 1995. Wells Fargo launches the first online banking platform, transforms the way that we bank. That was weird back then. And now it's just both of them are commonplace.
Well, and one of the things I love that you point out, and I know you did it in this workshop the other day, is you talk about, hey, when we were kids, what did our parents say? Don't run in cars with strangers.
Yeah.
Don't go over to strangers' houses. And
Mhm.
what are we doing now? Getting in Ubers, staying in Airbnbs.
But you, once again, the context of time is important for this because that all transpired in 2008 and 2009. Airbnb was 2008. Uber was founded in
Yep.
2009. Consider this 1994 to 2009. That's just 15 years, And what was the impetus for that exponential leap of capability? It wasn't the internet. It was almost built on top of the internet. It was the launch of the iPhone in
Oh yeah.
2007.
Yeah.
That that iPhone in 2007, which was really 13 years after kind of the internet reaches the mass adoption of humanity, the iPhone then creates another exponential leap because you have another capability that you're now building on top of. So now the internet is not just you're not just confined to a desktop or to a laptop.
Yep.
The internet now goes with you and you go with the internet.
Yeah. I mean, I think about just you and I in particular and our ages. I think, what are we, 5 years apart?
Yeah.
But we really did. I mean, we grew up with, as the cell phones were coming out, as the iPhones were coming out, we were I mean, I think I was in college when the iPhone came out.
Yeah.
Um, most of my friends really had only had cell phones at that point for a couple of years.
See,
So we kind of like were growing with it.
that's super fascinating. Once again, in just that 5-year difference of time, I had a flip phone, but then I was a very early adopter. Microsoft came out with a hybrid. It was like and this is going to really kind of, throw some age here. It was a hybrid between a Palm Pilot and a cell phone. And so it had like a little slide keyboard on it, but then
Oh, yes.
it had a stylus. Actually,
Yeah.
that was my phone in 2006 because that's when Delina and I got married, and there's a picture from our wedding day, and I'm on the phone, and it looks like a brick in my hand, and that was actually
Mm.
small because if you go back to what the phones were in the mid 90s, I mean it looked like you were
Yeah.
calling in an airstrike. Like
Zach Morris phone.
exactly. But that phone had the internet on it. It did have a more advanced browser back then. And then the iPhone came out literally about a year later after I got that phone. That's crazy
Yeah,
when I get, but what happens here, and maybe for those who are watching or listening or having the same experience, is when you just stop and pause just for a moment, how much things have changed.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
there's an emotive toll to this. And that emotional toll creates a physical toll. There is a physical price to pay for change and transformation, energetically going on within your mind, within your brain. And I know we're not going to get too deep into that today, but
uh-uh.
we talk about the neurological aspects of this within the book, because if we forget the emotional aspect of change and transformation, change, yet alone exponential change, is going to be very challenging for leaders and their teams.
Very challenging, very painful. So, James Robert, as we start to wrap up here, exciting day.
Very
Baking
much so.
Unchained is now available. Just takeaway. What is your hope? What is your hope with this book? What are you looking to achieve here? And then let's let our listeners know where they can find it.
My hope for this book is that it helps a million people around the world get beyond the confusion and the complexity of exponential change as a leader. It helps as a leader guide your team. It helps you as a leader guide yourself. Um, because if we can make a positive impact for a million people, and if they went on and positively impacted, we'll just say 100 lives, you've got an exponential multiplier there, and no one is going to be immune from exponential change. There are
Yep.
changes that we're going to experience over the next 5 to 10 years that we can't see right now. And it's a matter of you only gain perception from where you've been. Foresight is looking ahead, but I think there's so much uncertainty right now. And it's the uncertainty, it's the fear, it's the doubt that's holding individuals, holding leaders back, holding their teams back from unlocking new exponential growth opportunities. And so it's my hope with this book that they're able to gain clarity, that they're able to learn and see things from a different perspective, to increase their awareness, to make a commitment, to move forward with courage and confidence that they can continue to transform and grow personally and professionally as an individual, as a team, and as an organization.
Yep. And I think that's why now is really the perfect time for this book. So
Absolutely.
it's a great time to get it, read it, because you're right. We have a future of uncertainty. Well, I guess the only thing that we're certain of is there will be change.
There will be. There will
Thank
be.
you so much, James Robert. And where can our listeners find this book?
Absolutely. Amazon, or go to www.bankingonchange.com. Grab a copy for yourself. Grab a grab a copy. It actually pairs
Coffee and a copy.
it pairs nicely with coffee, a copy
It
with a
does.
coffee. Grab a copy for your team and read it together, because this is a journey that we don't take alone, but we take alongside a group who is committed to being even better together.
Well said. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Audrey. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Y'all be well. Do good. Be the light.